This is Fight Fans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! It's time!
You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 137 of The Low Blow. I am Justin Goodjoe, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? Surviving the times, as they say.
Yeah, no doubt. We're on Fight Fans Radio, USCombatSports.com, and SouthwestFight.com. Today, we're going to break down a pretty busy weekend in MMA action, at least. Invicta FC 5 is taking place, featuring a couple of local fighters, including Michelle Waterson in the main event. We're going to break down his UFC on field card from Sweden, which has gone through a lot of changes over the past week or so. And we're going to break down another Fight of the Year candidate, Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. All that on tap for this week's show. Before we start, Jorge, and since it is WrestleMania week, a big weekend, and it's certainly the pro wrestling world, usually that crosses over into pop culture. I want to just, I know I was pretty honest to you last minute, but do you have any kind of pro wrestling memory that comes to mind?
Like my favorite pro wrestling memory of all time?
Yeah.
It have to be, remind me if it was WrestleMania or if it wasn't, but Bret the Hitman Hart against Shawn Michaels, the Iron Man match, that thing lasted like an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my favorites ever. And of course, anytime the Ultimate Warrior would come out, man, that would just get me jacked. And, I'd want to go do cocaine and punch someone in the face.
Well, you should see him now, because that observation is not too far off. So.
Oh, no, that's terrible. And then I regret saying that. I take it back, Warrior.
You can get in contact with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. That has our show along with the rest of the Fight Fans Radio family. You can get in contact with our show through email through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also through YouTube, youtube.com/lowblow505. That has a lot of interviews with the best combat sports personalities, not only in New Mexico, but also the Southwest. And it has a couple of video interviews with Jorge breaking down this past weekend's local boxing action. So please check that out. Also, you can get in contact with the show through Facebook and Twitter, Low Blow Podcast through Facebook, and at The Low Blow through Twitter. So, man, before we get to the standing A count and the rest of our topics, let's get to your local fight breakdown. Two local fights took place over this weekend. Wool Warehouse 3 and Johnny Tapia presents the Next Chapter 3. So, 3 being the theme of last weekend. Just run through any notable decisions that happened on those cards, if you can.
Notable decisions. Josh Torres, who's quickly becoming one of the top 10, maybe even threatening top 5 boxers here in the state of New Mexico, defeated Jose Luis Sanchez, a young competitor. He was only 2-0, and Josh, of course, is 11-2 now. But Jose Luis Sanchez gave Torres hell for a little bit, and that's because Torres kind of laid off a little bit and kind of tried playing mind games with Jose Luis since he has less experience in the pro ranks. Either way, very good fight. Another one, Jordan Hernandez defeats Matt Baca. Against Matt Baca, again, is the only other fighter signed to Holly Holmes' promoters campaign known as Fresquez Productions. Jordan Hernandez, besides Austin Trout, he's the best technical boxer in the state of New Mexico, and the guy's only 3-0. Just unreal, the talent that this guy possesses and how he can break guys down. Then the following night, of course, we had the Johnny Tapia Presents 3 card. Christian Cabral defeated King of the Cage champion Donald Sanchez by just landing over the top rights all night. So Christian Cabral improves to 5-0 here. He's now a serious contender for the New Mexico, I guess, top 10 list also. So pretty good outcome there for Christian Cabral. And then in the main event, the shock of the evening, so far the shock of the year, the upset of the year, Hector Munoz loses to Bernardo Guerrero. Guerrero actually gave Hector Munoz the first loss of his career and just came away with a stunning left uppercut and dropped Munoz, and Munoz did beat the 10 count, but referee Rocky Burke didn't allow the contest to continue just because Hector Munoz was still seriously dazed by the time he got up at 8.
So that was a
So
good stoppage in your opinion.
good stoppage, very very good stoppage. I thought. I thought he may let it go just because he was the house fighter, but it didn't. That didn't end up being the case. So. Very, very impressed, very happy that Rocky Burke did stop the fight. The crazy thing about that is when Hector dropped, the clock was at 2:49, so meaning the fight was stopped right before the first round bell actually came about. So I mean, he maybe could have gone, given him a little something, but people talk about referees. Referees don't have a clock in front of them. This is not a basketball game where there's a clock hanging from the rafters or from the building. The referee has no idea what time it is or how much, how many seconds are left in the round. So you can't blame the referee for something like that. And also, a Fight of the Year candidate on that same Johnny Tapia card. I know that Johnny Tapia card was put together last second, but young Paul Castillo, 3-0, defeated Diego Bautista in one hell of a fight, man. My keyboard was full of blood by the end of their first round. It was crazy, man. Incredible. I
You
loved
needed
it.
some Clorox to get it
I
off.
loved it. Oh yeah, man. No, I mean, I ended up typing, man. There were bloody fingerprints all over my computer, man.
Jeez, that totally brings up the memory of one of the ring girls at the UFC wearing that white dress at the Ultimate Fighter finale, and I think that was her first time being at a UFC event. I forgot she's the host of the Pride shows on Field TV. I'm spacing on her name, but she's the one wearing that white dress, and there's a GIF of her just being in horror, just this bloody fight in the octagon. This blood just flies all over her white dress.
You
It's pretty
you gotta
insane.
post that photo or video, man. I don't think I ever remember seeing that.
Really,
Yeah.
before the show is over, I'll do my research and I'll find it because I think it was on
Uh,
cagepotato.com, and
All right.
it's pretty hilarious little GIF file there. But
That's why you know what. That's how you know someone doesn't go to fights often or covers them much is if they wear a light shirt. I mean, you can't go up in there wearing white or pink or orange just because that blood's gonna stand out on your gear, man.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So it seems like the local fights here in town delivered. You said that just real quickly. The Johnny Tapia card formed at the last minute, and we talked off the air about them maybe promoting their cards a little bit better. Do you see them maybe in the future, putting a little bit more
Yeah.
time and letting people know that they're putting on another show? Maybe let's say in the next couple of months. Do you think there'll be
Yeah.
more promotion the next
And
meeting?
you know what? And I'd hope so. And I would really like to see that, especially when they carry such a big name like Johnny Tapia. And I don't want to say that it was put together last second. This wasn't
Okay.
just done in like a week or 2 weeks. I mean, they had something planned. They knew they were going to host this event, but for the most of the part, up until a week or 10 days before the event even took place, you didn't know who all the guys on the card actually were. So that's what kind of was confusing to me is let us know what's going on. That way you can help promote the event. Either way, I mean there were only about 300, maybe 350 people there, but I mean it was pretty good action. You had the upset of the year and maybe the fight of the year on that card. So I mean you can't hate on that.
No doubt. I guess let's get into the standing eight count. The standing eight count is traditionally the top 8 stories in boxing and MMA that me and myself and Jorge think are most important. So I think, in our neck of the woods, I think this story is pretty prevalent since we've had this man on the show. Of course, Austin Trout, but also Harold Letterman. And you have some news about Austin Trout's chances in Harold Letterman's opinion.
Yeah, Harold Letterman, who, I interviewed in New York City and was super excited about that Austin Trout and Miguel Cotto fight, saying that it was going to be a sensational fight. He doesn't necessarily think the Canelo Alvarez versus Austin Trout fight is going to be any good or even competitive. He did tell Chris Robinson that he thinks that Canelo will shine and destroy, and this is a quote, the unbeaten Trout, who is coming off of a December win. And so here's basically the quote word for word. I hate to say this, but I think Canelo's going to destroy him. I like Austin Trout. I like Greg Cohen. And again, Greg Cohen is his promoter. I like the whole team, but Canelo's something special. He really is. Canelo is a star. He can box. He can move. He can punch. He's 22 years old, and he fights like a veteran that's 35 years old. He's a guy that's just a terrific natural great fighter. I love Canelo Alvarez. And I mean, the guy has flaws in his game. He's flat-footed. He hasn't boxed. He hasn't fought against any super notable opponents except Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley, of course, 40 years old. But for him to hold Canelo to this high of a regard, it blows my mind, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. Is it more of, Canelo being this far and away the superior fighter, or does Harold Letterman thinks that Austin Trout is overrated in some sense?
I'm not exactly sure. I think he just holds Canelo to that high of a regard. And again, um, every Austin Trout has never fought on Harold Letterman's network, being HBO. This fight against Canelo is going to be on Showtime. Canelo has fought on HBO several times, so Harold Letterman has seen Canelo fight more times firsthand than he ever has Austin Trout. So I think that weighs a lot into this also. And off potential, Canelo is only 22 years old and he has tons of room to develop. I mean, 22 years old, that's extremely young. But, I mean, you're fighting a very crafty southpaw in Austin Trout that can easily move around the ring. So, I mean, I don't know. I know we might be a little biased, but, I mean, Letterman is, might be underestimating Austin Trout.
Hmm. Let's get to some news with the UFC. This weekend is UFC on Field 9 from Sweden. It's supposed to be Alexander Gustafsson against Gegard Mousasi. That was a highly anticipated main event. I was really looking forward to that fight, but it seemed like Gustafsson suffered a cut, excuse me, not a truck, but a cut, excuse me, in training. At first, from what I heard, it was him sparring, but after further investigation, I believe it was because of him just wrestling around and he got a cut. So it was during a training session. Some people said it was sparring. There were some reports that he was actually wrestling, but nevertheless, it was a facial laceration. There's some pictures online. One that, if you look over Gustafsson's eye, it looks like a pretty deep gash that's on there. And then Dana White tweeted a picture sometime later on. It looked like Gustafsson was completely healed, but the picture was kind of far away. You couldn't really tell, the stitches on Gustafsson's eye. So the Athletic Commission in Sweden ruled, the Swedish MMA Federation ruled Tuesday morning that he was ineligible to compete on Saturday's card. So instead of canceling the event and canceling the main fight, it will be Gustafsson's training partner. Let me see if I can get his name right. Ilir Latifi. He's 7-2, of course 0-0 in the UFC. He'll be taking on Gustafsson's place. So I want to ask you, Jorge, just real quickly. I mean, we'll break down his card later on, but have you ever heard of Gustafsson's training partner, Ilir Latifi, before? If I'm saying that
Never.
correctly.
I have no idea who this guy is. Never heard of him. I mean, I assume he's based out of Sweden just because we haven't heard much about him here in the United States. So I'm looking at some of the events he was actually in. He was in shark fights. He was in these United Glory events that take place in Europe. But I mean, if you ask. I mean, maybe the super hardcore fans know about this guy, but I don't remember seeing him fight, to be honest.
Yeah, me either. I was looking all over Twitter and everybody was saying, who is this guy, where he's come from? But at least you can sell he has a 7-2 record and he's the training partner of Alexander Gustafsson. So there's some story there. It must be good just to see Mousasi in a UFC octagon. So there's some pluses there despite the main event change.
I mean, how much are you looking forward to this card? If you had to rate it from 1 to 10, man, you can't hold it that high, right?
Oh, I know. I mean, it's a UFC on Field card, so it's not like it's the end of the UFC or let's hate on Dana White. It's a Field card, and
So
I'd
check it
rather have
out.
this happen here and not on a pay-per-view.
Going to give you some numbers here. One casino has Gergard Mousasi as a 13-1 favorite against this guy, and the highest Latifi is if I'm even saying that right, he's a plus 700, which means he's a 7-1 underdog.
He's worth them. He's the bet. He's worth
Yeah.
the bet. I would do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Why
no
not?
one knows what this guy holds, and we'll see. I mean, what type of power does this guy have? I'm going to take a look at his record. I mean,
I
he
mean, he's a
has
very
only 2 KOs out of his 7 wins, but I mean, those guys you've never seen before could possibly be the most dangerous. And
It's true.
so, and Musasi, I mean, how much more do you think he has? I guess left in him. I don't think he's in the peak of his prime anymore. I mean, he might be on the downhill of it, but still, the guy hasn't lost in his last 6 fights. So
Yeah, we're gonna break that whole card down, and we'll break down, Musasi's just features in MMA, especially, he had that rough fight, I believe, against Keith Jardine, and really ever since then, his career has been kind of on a downturn. So we'll talk about those prospects later. But you have news on Gennady Golovkin, and specifically, he could be fighting as early as late June.
yep. And for those of you that missed it, Golovkin recently did, win a fight against Nobuhiro Ishida in Monaco by third round KO, and now he can possibly face Matthew Macklin here's sometime soon. Matthew Macklin, pretty tough fighter. I mean, I don't think Golovkin will have any issue with him. And as far as how the card came about, I mean, it's very interesting that this fight is actually even taking place. A lot of people thought that Golovkin would, take on some of those higher ranked guys, but he's supposed to defend his WBA middleweight title against Macklin on June 29th in the main event on HBO. So Golovkin was slated to come back. It's not exactly sure where this might happen. This might be a triple header. For people that don't know Matthew Macklin, he does have a decent record. I mean, the guy's 29-4 with 4 knockouts, so should be a decent test for Gennady Golovkin. But I mean, I'm not sure there's too many people in there that will give Gennady Golovkin actually much trouble. For those of you that don't know much about Matthew Macklin, he's from the United Kingdom. He recently lost back-to-back fights against Felix Strum in a fight many believe he won, and he lost to Sergio Martinez in the 11th round. So he's a pretty tough fighter. One judge had the fight, and then Julie Letterman, who's Harold Letterman's daughter and very good judge, actually had that fight even in the 11th round. So Matthew Macklin might give Gennady Golovkin a decent test, but it's hopefully sooner or later we actually get to see Gennady Golovkin fight so other guys in the super middleweight division, because Matthew Macklin is coming up from a smaller division. So I mean, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Mm-hmm. I guess good news for the UFC. The drug test has come back clean, but I believe only 8 fighters were tested. I'll just quote MMA Junkie here. They were sent an email by the Quebec Athletic Commission that the fighters tested negative for their substances on the March 16th pay-per-view. The substances tested for confidential. This was written by the QAC rep, the Athletic Commission rep. She added that the individuals were not named. The commission did not answer any follow-ups with an explanation as to why the names weren't released. So we're not even sure if they even tested Nick Diaz in the first place. So I think there's a report that came out later on that Nick Diaz did actually have a test and he tested negative. But I don't know if you believe Nick Diaz or not. It kind of depends if you believe him, if he really got tested. But for now, the test has come back clean, but we don't know who got tested for that pay-per-view.
Oh, drama.
Yeah.
All right. And in other news, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., there's rumors about this guy possibly fighting a rematch with Sergio Martinez, which I would love to see. I think he'd go in with a different game plan and maybe even knock out Sergio Martinez. And as a former WBC middleweight titleist, he says he'd rather face Gennady Golovkin or another super middleweight champ, Andre Ward. Andre Ward has also recently said that if he did take the fight with Chavez Jr., he doesn't think it would be easy. So let's hope that one of those 2 fights actually take place, just because of the fact of, one, how much buzz it will create, and the fact that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is coming back, after disappearing for a while in that cloud of marijuana smoke.
That's a bizarre statement, because you would think Andre Ward is the way tougher fight. Am I wrong about that?
No.
Andre Ward's a more technical boxer. I mean,
he is a more technical boxer.
Time with Ward than a rematch with Sergio Martinez.
I definitely agree. So I mean, he's what's going to make him more money? It's hard to tell. The Sergio Martinez fight might make decent money just because Andre Ward, he's relatively known in in the mainstream, but not as known as Sergio Martinez, I don't think. But those guys might be able to carry the same weight of money, and the Golovkin fight, I think Chavez Jr. might want to stay away from Golovkin for at least another year.
Hmm. Looks like there'll be more women in the UFC, and very, very interesting enough, when me and you saw the list for how many women are going to be in the UFC, Rosie Sexton was not on the list, and looks like she's going to be fighting Alexis Davis on UFC 161 in Canada. This will be another fight that pretty much set up Davis making a run for Ronda Rousey's title. Of course, you'll have to wait to see who wins between Misha Tate and who's she fighting? I forgot. I just totally spaced it.
Oh man,
And Kat Zingano. There we go.
yeah, there you
So the
go.
winner of that will be on the coach of the Ultimate Fighter. So the winner of that fight will be the coach and will fight Ronda Rousey. So Alexis Davis potentially either has to wait or take another fight. So the winner of this is certainly not guaranteed to be in the title mix anytime soon. But nevertheless, it's been confirmed by Ariel Helwani that this fight between Alexis Davis and Rosie Sexton will be on the UFC pay-per-view on UFC 161.
Ooh. And also in other news, we're going back to boxing, and what has been crazy time for amateur boxing and in the Olympics, especially with the headgear situation, and the lack of headgear is what I'm referring to. But Rio de Janeiro 2016, apparently professional boxers might be allowed to actually participate in the Olympics. And before people get crazy and think of, oh, some of these elite fighters participating, the offer only extends to fighters that have less than 15 pro fights. So should be very interesting to see how this develops. Should they allow professionals? You know, they need more time, just than more than just 3 years to actually try to figure all this out when it comes to what pros can, what pros can't. There might be specifics on, okay, if you have less than 15 fights, you couldn't be a world champion, because let's think about a fight that's coming up. Guillermo Rigondeaux has less than 15 fights, and at 10-0, he had already become world champion. So would you let him, who's known as the greatest amateur boxer of all time, and now a world champion with less than 15 fights, participate in the Olympics? I think not, man. We got to keep an eye out on a little more specifics and how this story starts to materialize. And I don't know, boxing is just, especially in the amateurs, it looks like it's turning into a circus, man.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre news. Hopefully they can find a decent resolution. This story comes via MMAJunkie.com. A Florida regulator finds no fraud with the transgender fighter Fallon Fox. So, a Florida regulatory agency that oversees the athletic commission has found insufficient evidence to prove transgendered MMA fighter Fallon Fox committed fraud prior to a recent bout. It was reported that Fox did not disclose her gender prior to her fight that happened a couple of months back. So this clears the way for Fox to compete at CFA 11. That's the semifinals of their big featherweight tournament on May 24th at the Bank United Center in Coral Gables, Florida. The event's expected to air on national television via Access TV. So that's very interesting, and it just further proves, I mean, if you take away this whole Fallon Fox controversy, this whole, I guess, perception that women's MMA has no depth. I mean, you have an organization putting on a featherweight tournament. Now, whether or not these women, I'm sure these women are somewhat decently talented. So, I mean, this talent pool continues to grow, and I think with that, since they found no fraud, and it seems like the Florida Elect Commission is willing to give Fallon Fox a license, it seems like she'll be competing in women's MMA for a decent amount of time, as long as the fights are in Florida.
This is unbelievable, man. This is going to open a crazy can of worms of what type of things can be done. And you've heard me say it before. I don't think she should be able to compete in either division. I can't comprehend this. Why they would even allow it, man.
Yeah, it's so tough, man. I just think the bottom line is whether our opinions are. I just don't think the athletic commissions have enough research and have enough backing to totally deny Fallon Fox the right to fight in a cage or ring or whatever in MMA. I gonna see the lawsuits just pouring all over the place. I mean, I think the UFC can avoid having her just because you can just say she's not good enough, and you can just say the competition she's fought is not good enough. That's their right to do. Same goes for an Invicta, but certainly, these minor organizations are going to want to have her on their show because she is an attraction for either because of her story or because she has been successful so far. Let's get to 2 rounds. That is the time where myself, and Jorge pretty much go on a little bit of a rant and pretty much talk about what's caught our eye in either boxing or MMA. Do you want to go first, man?
Go ahead, man.
Okay, mine's not a big deal. Mine's just about Invicta and specifically just about this organization going forward. I think this is the most bizarre story of a MMA organization I've ever seen, just in terms of we don't really know what their goals are. I think, on the surface is, of course, Invicta wants to promote women's fighting. But at the same time, they have this kind of weird pseudo relationship with the UFC that we've never seen any other organization have. I mean, in most other cases, the organization is already bought by the UFC. Strikeforce is bought, the WEC, the WFA, their talent folded into the UFC. So with Invicta, this is the first time in which, whether or not Shannon Ab wants to admit it, they have a working relationship. There's no denying that. And considering that after the show, she's permitted her fighters to compete on the Ultimate Fighter tryouts that are taking place later this month. I just don't know what their future holds for this organization going forward in terms of them becoming really possibly a top 3 MMA promotion. I mean, if their talent's going all to the UFC, I mean, they're just a pseudo farm league for the UFC's women's division. So I think they have a lot of questions and a lot of, soul searching to do, what they want to do. I mean, it's totally different when UFC totally shunned women. I mean, it's real easy to be the only place to see women's fighting. But now that the UFC has embraced, Ronda Rousey and the rest of the 135-pound division, it opens Pandora's box. And now they can embrace 125 pounds, 115, and so on. So this will be real interesting to see where Invicta goes from here.
Yeah, and I completely agree, man. But for me, it's going to be something completely off base, and it's going to be fighter entrances or ring walk-ups.
I like this.
Last week it was, I mean, I thought it was pretty epic seeing, good old David Rickles come out with a dinosaur, man. How awesome was that? And I mean, what kind of budget does this guy have that he had this automated freaking creature just walking with him into the ring in his fight against Saeed Awad, man? And
it was on SportsCenter, yeah.
And also, when it does come to situations like this, I mean, if you're going to go in the ring and, have these crazy entrances, you better be ready to back it up in the ring or the cage. And after getting beat up for what was about, good, I mean, how long was that? Maybe 8-9 minutes that he was getting beat up by Awad. I thought Awad was easily winning that fight. David Rickles comes back and is able to drop Saeed Awad and, maybe ride home on his dinosaur, man.
Yeah, I mean, even though it was on SportsCenter, it was on the not top 10. I think a lot of people were hating on it.
I loved it.
Me too. I mean, I'm from the pro wrestling world, so anything that's, off base and exciting, I'm all for it. I mean, I know the UFC, they kind of bashed their history in terms of having the big stage and the pyro, but I kind of wish they'd bring that back. I mean, they had the stage because they wanted to block off the arena because they didn't have that many fans back then, but I'm all for the stage and the pyro and the big circumstance like Pride used to have and like UFC used to have back in the day, making a comeback in 2013.
Do you ever think the UFC will loosen up on that again?
No, because they want to be, a sport and they want to be accepted in the mainstream sports world. And just having those kind of entrances, I think with Dana White makes them nervous. Like it's one of those things where you're not secure in your own shell yet. I think give it another like 10 years when UFC is a fully established league and MMA is a fully established sport. I think it could go in that direction. I think you see boxing. I mean, when I went to the Manny Pacquiao fight, that was nothing but pro wrestling. I mean, they had the big video screen in the center, the lights were flickering, high music. It's when Manny Pacquiao was fighting at the big LCD screen surrounding him. I mean, that's nothing but, WWE right there. So it's not too much of a stretch that UFC will somewhat do that, but not in the near future. Let's talk about Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado, part two in our main event topics, man. Just an unbelievable classic. Um, a lot of people were speculating if we were going to be able to see another blood and guts war between Mike Alvarado and Brandon Rios, and we saw that. Mike Alvarado got the victory via, I think I'm trying to see scores on 115, 113 twice, and one score of 114, 113 for the vacant interim junior welterweight title. Dan Raphael has some comments in his boxing notebook saying that this two sets of fights seems to be on par with Gotti Ward, if not better. Before you get to that, Jorge, can you just talk about the fight and talk about Mike Alvarado's strategy? It seems like he used a little bit more movement. It seems like he evolved and Brandon Rios didn't.
He did use a lot more movement, and specifically the movement came in the second half of the fight, specifically rounds 5.5 all the way to, ultimately what was the last round, round 12, because obviously this went to a decision. Early on, he was trading with Brandon, and Brandon actually hurt him. I was surprised that Brandon was able to hurt him with the jab, though. I'm not sure if you saw that. Brandon Rios threw what was, I guess, kind of like a lunging jab, but it was straight on. And even Roy Jones Jr. during the broadcast said that Mike Alvarado didn't expect that, because you don't expect a brawler to throw such good of a technical punch, and it landed right on the spot, and it dazed Mike Alvarado for a little bit. And I think shortly after that, is when he did switch his style and started moving laterally for the first minute and a half. So I think a lot of people were kind of turned off that Mike Alvarado wasn't attacking within the first minute and a half of the fight, but he was playing his game. I mean, he was boxing from a distance. Brandon Rios couldn't land on him, and Mike Alvarado would actually start landing more punches toward the end of the round. It's a similar style that Richard Abril had against Brandon Rios. Richard Abril, I feel, was actually robbed out of that fight against Brandon Rios. Mm-hmm. So Mike Alvarado took a little something out of his page, and you can't even necessarily say out of his page, because this is how Mike Alvarado fights. He's technical. He's a puncher, what they call a puncher brawler, so a boxer brawler, if you will. And he, lived up to it in the second half of that fight. I thought early on the first 5 rounds could have been scored 4-1 for Brandon Rios, maybe even 5-1, but that's when it changed the second half of the fight. What did you have the fight? I'm just interested, because I think the scoring is crazy. The scoring for the first time was dead on, and I think 2 rounds for me, the 4th round and the 11th round, could have gone either way and ultimately turned the fight. But Mike Alvarado, just by seeing the style and I guess the effective punching, he won this fight. But those 2 rounds, I think, turned it around, and the judges, obviously lean toward him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the strategy by Mike Alvarado was brilliant, and it was a way that I think Alvarado was using his footwork and being active, that the fight was still action-packed, where you didn't really, I don't think, from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't the case with Abril and Rios. So with this fight, I think I pretty much have no problem with the scorecard. My question is, if these guys, fight, 10 more times, especially with the strategy, I see Alvarado winning around 70% if Brandon Rios is not evolving. My question to you, Jorge, since it seems like it's going to be an instant rematch, it's pretty obvious, do you think Brandon Rios will use a different strategy, or do you think Brandon Rios is even capable of that? Do you think Brandon Rios is stuck in his ways and he just feels that he can beat Mike Alvarado without changing any of his strategy?
Well, here's the thing about what Rios, I guess, failed to do the second half of the fight. He failed to cut off the ring. He was just walking toward Alvarado, being outboxed, instead of stalking him down. It was rare that Brandon Rios in that second half of the fight was actually stalking, and what I mean was being the aggressor, charging after him, not walking toward him. I mean charging at him, and we actually didn't see that. What could change for Rios in the rematch? Easy. Have Mike Alvarado come out of his shell once again, the way he did in the first fight, the way he did in the first half, where Mike Alvarado is just brawling. I know it's difficult to do when Mike Alvarado, looks like he was pretty disciplined this time around. but cut off that ring a little bit better and maybe chase him down a little bit more. And let's not forget, Brandon Rios did knock him out in the 7th round, or stopped him, I should say, in the
Controversially.
controversially, but either way, I mean, people were split pretty even on whether that was a good stop or not. So,
Sure.
and of course, we saw Mike Alvarado stunned. I believe maybe 3 times. I believe in this fight where you thought, okay, oh wow, he's in trouble. But what happened in this fight that Mike Alvarado didn't do in the first fight is he was able to land those hooks from a distance, and he himself dazed Brandon Rios. Also, he would. I don't think he dazed him as many times in the first fight as he did this time around. So Mike Alvarado, obviously brand new new strategy by sticking to his old tricks and outboxing him. It was a beautiful display of boxing at the end, the second half of that fight, and he deserved the victory. And now it's on to the part 3. These guys have to fight a rubber match.
How do you think Brandon Rios is going to take this loss? He seemed pretty fired up right after the fight was over. Just both these guys just like screaming at each other when they're being interviewed with Max Kellerman. Usually, guys, when they go through a war like that, it's usually a lot about respect. They give the hugs, but these guys wanted to go another 12 rounds. Have you ever seen that before? In which kind of both guys are screaming for another 12 rounds. Let's clear the ring. Let's do it again right now.
Yeah, no, it was pretty amazing, and it was actually great to see. And it was kind of a way of Brandon Rios admitting that he wasn't the better man that night, and it was the first time in his career that he lost. I guess on record,
Yeah.
that he did lose the fight, but I think he was just animated. He knew. I think it's something special that we're seeing between the two of these guys. This might end up being 4 or 5 fights, man, that we see these guys go at it. And I don't mind seeing every single one of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. If they're going to be up to the quality of the first 2, I'm all forward with him.
And also, when he brings up, let's not forget what Dan Redfield compared this to. He says it was on par or even better than Gotti Ward. All right, the first Gotti Ward fight was pretty freaking epic. The second one was, it was pretty good. It was okay. As far as these 2 fights, I'm not sure. I think there was a little more drama in the first fight between Alvarado and Rios than there was this time around. But either way, 2 stupendous, incredible fights, and he might have something there, because if they put on a third great fight, then that would outdo, the Gotti Ward, who, in my opinion, had 2 great fights and 1 very good fight. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I just hope they get the recognition as they deserve. It kind of bothered me, honestly, that this was a boxing after dark fight. Did that kind of rub you the wrong ways, considering they put on a classic the first time?
Well, yeah, I think so too, but I don't want it on pay-per-view, man. If they put it on regular HBO, I don't mind it at all. I don't mind paying the $10 a month to be able to watch that fight as opposed to the 65.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tomato, world championship boxing and boxing after dark, but it just seems like they deserve that kind of mainstream spotlight.
I completely agree with you.
I want to get to Gennady Golovkin again, just in terms of him just annihilating Yusubisho Ashida in Monte Carlo. This fight was not televised. I mean, I think you can still find it on YouTube. I don't know what language the commentators were speaking in, but nevertheless, you could tell that Golovkin just destroyed this guy. Even, I believe, not Dan Raphael, but Al Bernstein was not really a fan of this fight when it was first made. Do you think this HBO dropped the ball here and not airing this fight?
No, I don't think
or
so.
Or his promotions company.
No, I don't think so. I mean, this may have been an in-between the fight. I mean, let's not forget he fought a month and a half ago, or a little more than 2 months ago against Gabriel Rosales in a decent and an entertaining fight, to say the least. I didn't think once that Rosado was going to win this fight, but Rosado did give him a little bit of hell for a few minutes. But Ishida, he probably wasn't approved by HBO as an opponent. I mean, 24-7. That's not going to get you into a main event unless you're a world champion.
Mm-hmm.
On HBO is what I mean. So.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's break down Invicta FC 5. We both tried to order this pay-per-view the last time. We had our trouble with the Ustream. And I think pretty much Invicta took the blame on that. I've ordered just other stuff on a Ustream of just other pay-per-views. specifically just with another pro wrestling tie-in. A company out of Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling. They have their shows on there and had no problem. So it's clearly not a Ustream problem. Before we break down some of the fights on here, specifically Jorge, are you nervous to put down your $10 for the show? Because I'm very enthusiastic to see this card. I want to pay my money, but I'm kind of worried that we'll experience another some more technical problems like we did in Invicta FC4.
Here's the thing about it. I don't mind shelling out the $10, but as long as they're refunding me right away. I mean, $10 is $10. I mean, if I'm out with $10, it won't mess up my week. I'd be kind of upset if one I'm lost out on my $10 and then the event didn't stream. But they did a pretty good job of refunding people right away last time, from what I remember.
They did. Yeah, and I think for me, it's more the time. Like you're blocking off 3 hours. You could be seeing a movie or hanging with your girl or doing something.
Yeah.
And you're watching. You're sacrifice your time to watch this to be entertained, and you don't get that. It's one thing if it's free, but it's another thing you're sacrificing your time and money, and that makes people mad.
Completely agree. So I think this time around, I think they've definitely worked out the kinks. They have to know what happened last time, or else they wouldn't, put themselves on the line like this again.
Yeah, and I hope so. And plus, another plus, no offense to Boss Rudin. I'm a huge fan of his, just him as a fighter and him as an MMA personality. But I'm glad Mauro Andallo was back being the commentator for this one because it was a rough going. The little parts I did see, Boss Rudin was not good as a play-by-play man. And I'm glad he's, he could be a color analyst. I think he's very good in that role, but not as a play-by-play person. So I'm glad Mauro's back. The main event of Invicta FC5 is Jessica Penne versus Michelle Waterson for the Atomweight Championship. Penne's been on a roll. She's won her last 3 fights by finishes. She has a submission, TKO, and another submission. Michelle Waterson hasn't been too bad herself. She has a controversial split decision by some people's eyes with Lacey Shuckman, a very good fight. She finished Diana Royale, who fought on the MMA Fight Pit, and I believe she fought Angelica Chavez on that show.
She did. She defeated Angelica Chavez in that event.
Yep. And she has a couple of more victories before her loss against Elena Reed. That was in 2009. Just taking a look at this fight, man, and I guess break down as best you can this fight in terms of what Waterson has to do. Penne is very imposing. I mean, she's really a master at cutting down weight. I mean, I don't want to. I want to make sure I watch my words here, but her frame is rather large for the division. I mean, she's a tall woman for that division. I don't want to say she's a large woman at all because she's clearly in shape, but what I mean is the size difference is pretty much imposing between Penne and Waterson. So how do you see Waterson overcoming, the size advantage that Penne is going to have on her?
I think she's going to have to use her karate or her stand-up skill for this fight, just because I don't think Michelle Waterson will be able to deal with her jiu-jitsu, especially the longer limbs. And Michelle Waterson is listed as 5'4". I mean, she's probably shorter than that, man. She's probably pushing 5'3", a little bit shorter, 5'2", 5'3". But her stand-up, her Muay Thai, her karate, her wushu, I think that's what's going to win it for her. If she's able to box and bounce around and land some of those Muay Thai kicks, I think she'll be okay. But it's a tough fight either way, man.
Yeah. There's some other good fights on this card, of course. Christine Cyborg Santos is making her Invicta debut against Fiona Muslow. We also have Sarah Kaufman, who now trains at Jackson's against Leslie Smith. There's some bad blood if you watched the Invicta previous shows between Beck Hyatt and her opponent Jamiska Cleve. Also, you have Caitlin Young. Jackson's own Jody Escobel is on this card against Alex Chambers. I wanted to ask you, man, as I said in the on a 2-round segment earlier, it just seems Invicta's in this weird place, and I can't help but think, specifically of Jessica Penne, even if she wins her fight. I mean, she fought at 115 in Bellator, and since these Ultimate Fighter tryouts are taking place in the next couple of weeks, and since they have permission, I mean, for a lot of these women's fighters on here, wouldn't it be conventional wisdom for them to try out even though the weight class might be above? I mean, you look at Kenny Florian. I mean, he was a middleweight on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and he ended up fighting in the featherweight division when his career was finished. So clearly, fighters, men or women, are willing to put in a sacrifice, and willing to gain in more weight and fight outside of the weight class even though it might be inconvenient. They want the chance to be in the UFC. What do you think? Do you see these women being loyal to Invicta, or do you see them, a lot of them, kind of bolting to try out for this reality show?
No, I think a lot of them will bolt, and when I say bolt, it just really depends on what they're having done. A lot of these women only have one, two, at the most three fight contracts with Invicta. I don't think there's more than that. From what I've heard, uh, a lot of these girls are actually one and done, or signed on a per fight basis, depending on if they win or not. So as far as Invicta, I mean, let the women, fight if they would like to, and bypass this opportunity that they have for the UFC. But like you've said, it's a little strange to me why they wouldn't just attempt to go to the UFC, or try out for one of these shows, and they can always come back to Invicta. Invicta will always be there as, the second, I guess now the second tier for women's MMA.
Yeah, this is. I want to root for this organization to succeed, but I just don't know. Their ceiling at the end of the day seems pretty low because of this working relationship with the UFC. Um, I wanted to talk about the Cyborg Santos angle of this card. Um, we don't know too much about Fiona Muxlow. Um, it seems like Tito Ortiz spent more time hyping up a fight between Cyborg and Ronda Rousey than pushing Cyborg, the fighter herself, and her being a part of Invicta. Um, where do you see Cyborg if well, most people think she's going to win? Um, do you see her back in the UFC? It seems like there's some rumors that Cyborg's not completely cut off from the UFC. Um, do you see her eventually making her way back to Zuffa?
I mean, I hope so, just because of the fact of how much buzz of fight and her, any of the, you know, either Misha Tate or Ronda Rousey, how much buzz that would actually create. But it's just very strange that they decided to take this route. Doesn't really make any sense to me. So for her to be on here, yeah, people are going to be interested, but are you going to have an overwhelming amount of people? Is Invicta going to see a huge increase because she's on there? I'm not too sure, man. Because the general public heard of Cyborg, a good year and a half or 2 years ago, or whenever it was the last time she actually fought with Strikeforce. But I mean, she's faded out of the consciousness of the general sports fan, man.
That's a good point. I mean, she was on, even Stuart Scott mentioning her name out of the blue. She was on fire with casual fans, and I think you have a good point that now she's going to out of sight, out of mind. And considering her opponent Muslow fought on the New Year's Eve show for Dream, losing to Marlis Kunin, kind of seems like her competition might not be the best in the short term. And considering that 145 is still being a division, still trying to find itself, she's in a weird position for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, Any other fights that kind of pull your eye, man? Especially you have Pat Barry's girlfriend on here. I can't even say her name. She has a weird last name. Rose Namajunas.
Yes.
She's going to be on this card. They put out some weird YouTube videos, man. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but they're a weird couple. They're
What
perfect
kind of
together.
weird? Like, what's the Jets head coach name?
Rex Ryan.
Rex Ryan, like him, Rex Ryan and his wife type videos. Have you ever seen those, man?
Oh, the foot videos.
Oh yeah, man. Is it that weird?
I think it's in that ballpark actually.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, you're kidding me.
Somewhat, but I mean, just in terms, not in terms of like sexually or anything, but just in terms of
Oh.
just pure weird. I think it's kind of in that ballpark. I think there's a thing where like Rose is asleep and Pat Barry is totally messing with her, and then there's an opposite video where Rose gets her revenge. They're very weird. They're a very out there kind of couple there. Especially her last fight, in which besides her winning, the main part of that fight was Pat Barry going nuts in that corner. So
Yeah.
that's all everybody wanted to talk about was Pat Barry flipping out.
Who
in her
who would you
corner.
like? Who would you like Cyborg to fight here in Invicta? I mean, how long is she gonna even stay with him, man? I mean, do you think she does a couple of fights with him, or maybe just one off, and then
I think,
goes off to
yeah,
a random Russian promotion?
maybe. I don't think that's out of the ordinary of fighting Brazil or something like that. I think with Tito, he wants to keep her in the United States, I think, as much as possible. And I think to me, her fighting Marlis Kunin might not be a bad idea. Marlis is a big name. Um, that would be a decent fight to put on during Invicta. That might not be a bad idea, just for the short term, especially since Ronda Rousey is just going to be booked till December. And so let's say they hash out all the differences and somehow she can make 135, best case scenario, or you can do a catch weight. The earliest you can do it is like February or early March of 2014. So, because of the Ultimate Fighter taping. So, to me, and also you keep in mind the UFC, certainly you have to take a look at Sarah McMahon. Certainly take a look at Alexis Davis. Those are two opponents that if Santos is kind of wavering if she wants to fight Ronda Rousey, they're going to put those opponents that want to fight first and kind of put Cyborg on kind of the back burner until she is fully committed in fighting in the bantamweight division of the UFC. Let's talk about this UFC on Fuel Card, man, just real quickly. Like you said, man, there's some decent fights on here. Personally, I like the Mike Eason Brad Pickett fight. I think that's going to be awesome. Not to mention Diego Brandao, who trains here at Jackson's MMA. He takes on Pablo Garza. I think Pablo Garza is very underrated. So there's a lot of fights on here that are not bad. You have Philip DeFries taking on Matt Mitrione. Excuse me. You have Ryan Couture fighting Ross Pearson in a co-main event. That's very interesting that, the UFC and specifically Dana White has talked a bunch of trash about Ryan Couture, but yet he's the main event of this card against Ross Pearson. Nevertheless, of course, it's Fuel, but still, he's the co-main event. And then you have, of course, Musasi as the main event still. Any fight that has your interest slightly at all, Jorge?
I think the Pearson and Ryan Couture, just because I want to see how Ryan, is able to handle Pearson. I think that's going to be a tough fight for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Diego Brandao, of course, see how he, actually bounces back since, he did lose to Derek Elkins. That was a while back. That was May of last year. And then he did pull off a decision against Joey Gambino. But, I'm looking to see if he can build off of the momentum that he actually had, from a couple of years ago and winning that Ultimate Fighter finale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of good fights on this card. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Mike Easton and Brad Pickett do against each other, since I think both men were on a roll until they ran into some losses, specifically Mike Easton against Rafael Sunsao and then Brad Pickett losing to Eddie Weiland. So I think both guys are looking to get back on the on the winning side of things. Ross Pearson returning to lightweight. He talked about how he struggled to make featherweight over and over again and lost the passion for MMA. He was talking about that on the MMA Hour. I think it's good to see him in his natural weight class. And it's very interesting that he had a lot of hatred towards George Stephanopoulos. If you remember that fight, man, they're both coaches on the Ultimate Fighter, the Smashes, and both guys did not like each other at all. And Ross Pearson destroyed him. So it's very interesting to see. Ryan Couture is a very nice guy. So I think there's going to be a contrast between this fight when it happened before. With Gegard Mousasi, man, this fight's considered to be kind of like a glorified exhibition. The fight's now 3 rounds. For some reason, if Mousasi loses, can he be finished? Is he automatically cut? John Fitch got cut, and he's certainly, not nearly as bad of a loss losing to Damian Maia. Honestly, look at Mousasi's resume. I have to say, it's not really that impressive. You take a look at his last fights here. Mike Kyle, okay, Alvin St. Preux, a unanimous decision. He got in a draw with Keith Jardine, and most people thought he was supposed to destroy him. He beat Jake O'Brien, all right. And his last loss was against King Mo, and people thought he was supposed to destroy King Mo, and King Mo used his superior wrestling and took him out. So, to me, King Mo's his last decent opponent, and he lost. So, what's the big deal with Gegard? Honestly, a lot of people are picking this guy as the next UFC light heavyweight champion. People were saying that he was going to be, before even John Jones, he was supposed to be the next dominant fighter in all of MMA. But according with his resume and his results, I'm not that impressed. Am I just underrating him here, or what do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think you're just seeing the type of competition that he's gone against, and you've seen what Jardine ultimately turned into, and what just happened to King Mo. So I think you're going off of that, and like you said, the competition that he has faced isn't amongst the greatest or the elite. But you got to remember that he's an excellent striker. People don't realize how good of a striker this guy is with the boxing and the kickboxing. Of course, he's from the Netherlands, so he's one of the better just strikers when it comes to standing up. As far as his loss, I mean, that's going to be tough. The only upside that he does have is you forget this guy has over 38 fights, and he's only 27 years old, man.
Wow, that's unbelievable. You'd think he's like in his late 30s.
You'd think the guy was 33, 34 just because based of the experience and how long you heard his name, but that's what people forget, that this guy is still young. I mean, I like saying he's young because he's the same age I am, so
Yeah. Yeah, it is very just all these fights you think the guys are just way older than they are. I mean, same thing goes with Melvin Gillard, even Joe Lozon. I mean, a lot of these guys have tons of fights and are not even 25 yet. It's pretty nuts.
But I mean, come on, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, a fight between Gegard Mousasi and John Jones. I mean, come on.
I think even him versus Phil Davis, he has trouble. Honestly, we only have 3 minutes left. Anything else you wanted to get to before we say goodbye? Usually we're packed up till the hour's over.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't notice. I've been sleeping on a lot of this national news, but I didn't realize Marcos Maidana and Josecito Lopez were going to fight. I don't know. That's a hell of a fight to me for boxing, man.
Did that fight just get made a couple of...
It must have been recently, or people just talk about it, because on June 8th, it looks like him and Marcos Maidana, or Josecito Lopez, Marcos Maidana is going to square off. That same day, Erislandy Lara is going to fight Alfredo Angulo. I love that fight. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen if Erislandy Lara is going to try to pull some of his dirty maneuvers, but I'm just telling you right now, Alfredo Angulo ain't going to fall for it.
Is that going to be on Showtime or HBO?
That's more than likely, just because Lara's an HBO fighter, Angulo's a Showtime fighter, and Josecito and Maidana have been a Showtime fighter. I'm not exactly sure. This is going to be very interesting on what network actually picks it up. I think this might be a Showtime fight. I'll have to double check on that, but definitely looking forward to that one.
I think that might wrap up our show, man. Again, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio. Big thanks to them again for hosting us all this time through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. That has our show and the rest of the Fight Fans Radio family. That has shows on pro wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and just general MMA. So please go check that out.
Here,
go ahead.
I was going to say, right away, I mean, I'm thinking about it now while you're actually talking. Kind of silly. A lot of these fighters, or most of these fighters, are Golden Boy fighters. What did we learn last month? All Golden Boy fighters have gone to Showtime. So Showtime is the network this is going to obviously come on.
There you go. You can get in touch again with youtube.com/lowblow505 for the latest Southwestern combat sports videos. Facebook, Twitter, and of course our email, lowblow505@gmail.com. Also get in touch with southwestfight.com. It has all of some opinion pieces, all the latest recaps concerning New Mexico fight news. So please go check that out if you want to be informed of what's happening in the land of enchantment. And of course, U.S. Combat Sports, a big thanks to them always. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
This has been The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, U.S. Combat Sports, and Southwest Fight. We'll see you next week.
Don't mess up this weekend, Invicta.